Good morning. We're going to call our second meeting of February to order. The Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency's Neighborhood Investments Committee. Do we have any updates, changes to our agenda? Anyone here for public comment? We have a quorum. We have two sets of minutes to take a look at. A previous meeting, the February 14th meeting, and then October 2024. I guess we could move those. I'll move those both as a package. Second. Fernando seconds. Do we have any comments, corrections to the meeting minutes? Read them up. Saying none. All in favor of approving minutes for February and October? Unanimous. To the new business. The first item is a resolution, community-based development organization application from Black Hands Universal. On the page. Page 12 of our agenda. So there were some, I would say, not going to characterize it as major and minor issues. There were some issues that staff has informed us of. Primarily, some items were not clear in the application. I think we ran into the same issue with their first application for the status. But of the tests that are required as to whether the organization meets the requirements for this designation, they were all met. So any discussion? Anyone have any questions about this application? And of course, if they do get the designation, it means that they can receive more CDBG funds beyond the 50% public in any applications that BHU puts in for public service, puts in under the public service category for funding. They are exempt from the 15%.
What CBDO designation has long been meant for the organizations that apply to us is that if they're applying in the economic development category for something that might also be eligible for public service category, that's when they are exempt from public services. Yeah, they can't be applying to public services. They have to be.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Development to qualify to carry out a special economic activity, which they could also apply for in the public service category, which is what but be subject to the cap, which is what Black Hands Universal is doing for 2025. This is actually to designate them for the 2024-25 program year. Last year, this committee recommended and IURA adopted $6,600 for their career resources program. They had applied for more than that in the economic development category last year. So this year they're not applying for a CBDO. So they haven't implemented that program yet because we needed to designate them as CBDO. So now get the paperwork together and then took a long time to do all of the analysis, and so that's why we're here now.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So did everyone follow? Okay. Well, Fernando.
So there were a couple of items on the
Memo. On the memo.
Yeah, I would not eliminate them, but there were questions, like they're not a 501c3, federally designated. The director is on the board.
Yeah.
That's not considered like optimum. Uh, have they talked about addressing that? Again, it doesn't disqualify them, but it's just something to say, yeah, we recognize that we were gonna apply for the 501c3. For their sake, it would make it easier, just more streamlined,
If they were final.
if they were, right? It's just one less flag.
Yeah, and I think there's significant benefits to them, I would think, if they were a 501c3, because most private foundations and some public funding streams, not ours, some public funding streams require that.
Well,
So, but almost all private foundations require 501c3 status to receive grants. So and if donors want to donate to them, the donation will not be tax exempt, which doesn't preclude the donor from donating, but a lot of times donors will not be tax exemption. So these are ways that currently their fundraising is constrained. If they were to go forward with a 501c3 status, I actually have a question I don't know the answer to, but I don't know what happens besides an application going into IRS. I don't know if an IRS representative normally contacts, the organization applying, or I don't know what that process looks like, and I don't know how IRS would know, for example, that somebody that else that's on the board is benefiting from the HU programming and hopefully no financial benefit. So I don't know how IRS guards against that when they are approving applications, but they do have a lot of different regulations that speak to what is acceptable to them, and I expect that that's something that we're going to be enforced by IRS. That was a long answer. I don't even know if that was the answer.
yeah, well, I guess my question was recognizing these less than optimal circumstances. Are they talking about moving ahead with that? Have they, would a 501c3 application would reconsider the makeup of the board, and then, that issue, I forgot about that issue of having board members be recipients of funding, which, so, you can address that with conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Procedures.
I mean, I can't speak to that. I did suggest to BHU that when I learned that they were not now on the path to applying for their 501c3, I suggested that they consider doing that. And I was told later that they are pursuing it, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's not.
And I haven't heard. I did bring up at one point the issue with a potential conflict with the board member who receives the financial benefit. And so I spoke to Mr. Smith about that. At that time, I thought he was indicating that he would bring that up and potentially that person, to consider whether that person should be considered to bring up that issue to the board, and that the person involved might step down. However, when he submitted the board list, the person name is still on it, so I don't know what that conversation was.
Does the organization have an annual audit?
Not that I know of.
Since they're not a 501c3 and don't file a 990, I'm just wondering if that presents any issues in terms of our monitoring the organization and ensuring that they are fiscally sound.
Well, I would say, I mean, we might be able to refer to names when we have questions. And questions have come up over the various organizations. The 990 is a helpful tool for transparency. So we don't have that tool in this case. So I don't know what the answer is to that question. I think that, like, as I said in the memo, we requested some information from Mr. Smith about his tax filing. He said that he filed quarterly taxes this quarter, did not file taxes in the previous year. Not sure why. That could have been because of being below a certain threshold. But I don't have some of his tax return. So,
but it hasn't risen to the level of, I don't know, concern or deep concern for staff.
well, I think that there's two different things. One is that we haven't in the past required organizations to submit their tax filings as part of the CBDO process. It's normally part of the application process. So that's, and we don't require them at this point to be a 501c3 as part of the CBDO process, so they meet the minimum thresholds. This body, I could recommend the IURA at some point, people, staff might want to bring forward a discussion in the future about, we can create other local requirements. So going through this process is kind of like brought up to me anyway, several things that perhaps we haven't thought about before, that we might want to, you know, create some new processes going forward, but like retroactively in this case. I think, as I said in the memo, and as Nell's kind of clarified my wording, is the exposure financially is not great in this case. And as I recall your discussion last year, when this organization was kind of on the bubble, but being funded is there was a lot of desire to show this organization's support for what they were doing while recognizing the amount that they applied for last year. Their application was not as strong as others were in comparison, and the committee also had the questions, but wanted to be able to support this organization in some way. So again, I think the financial exposure is not as great.
Okay. No, primarily my question had to do with if staff's concerns regarding financial transparency rose to a level that we might want to take into account. But if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not really.
I mean, I think that's where in the future, that's why I'm having a discussion in the future about maybe creating some other policies relating to CBD applicants. I think that would be useful to do for the transparency issue. But at this point, I think we've looked into the issues enough to understand. I mean, if I had to summarize things, I would say that from what I've been able to see, it's not necessarily that the organization is doing something wrong, but it's not necessarily doing something right. And by that, I mean best practice.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of kind of best practices that they could implement, and I think it would be useful if the organization, from my perspective, if they sought out guidance for doing that. I think that would benefit the organization, but and we can impose additional requirements in their contract, IRA could. However, I don't think organizationally, I mean, it's for them to make the decision about whether they want to increase their ability to raise funds by becoming a 501c3. If they want to perhaps follow best practice by not including certain board members as voting members at all, because sometimes organizations look at a board and just for credibility's sake, don't want to see potential conflict, but those are all things that the organization itself would be doing.
Mary?
Yeah, I've been listening to this intently, and so it seems like there's some, you mentioned best practice, and so some organizations may not know what that means. So what does that mean? And we're requiring something like that, but it's not clear what that means. And that might mean something very different from one organization to another and one community to another. So, so we're talking about an organization who doesn't have a 501(c)(3), right? And so, there are conditions around that and categories. So this particular one that we are spending a great deal of time talking about does not have what we would call, in a category, a 501(c). But that doesn't negate them from actually applying. Because we have others that do not have that as well as current in what we are going to look at today.
There is a slight distinction, I would say, is that when they first applied, they were being fiscally sponsored
Yes,
by another organization and community. I'm aware of some organizations that have applied that are being fiscally sponsored. So that change would be due from prior applications to me. So that's one level that sometimes organizations don't have their 501(c)(3) that are being fiscally sponsored. There is another applicant right now that is an actual business.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
There is another organization. I'm not mistaken, I need to double check, but West Haven Farm. Applied, I believe I'm not.
Yes, they are not,
There.
according to what some.
Yeah, so they don't need to, but I think this whole, because CBD, gene regulations don't require that. But this whole issue is brought up that we may want to require, certain things in the future for CBD designation, but you're right, they're not required.
Yes.
That's your point, and they're not required. Best practice for governance of nonprofit organizations, there are a number of resources online. Local resources that one could avail themselves of if they wanted to. And you're right, there's different practices from organization to organization, community to community, absolutely.
Yeah, asking the questions, I was asking the questions, really just trying to understand if there are any issues. That beyond this application, I think. So just to try to get an understanding of any exposure to the agency. I understand, you know, it's a small, BHU is a small organization, trying to do this work, it's organically grown. And there are some things that they will, as the capacity comes, I think that they will implement. But in terms of this designation, they've met the thresholds. And so, I mean, to me, that's the important point. And if there's no further discussion, all. Wait, did we move this? We didn't move, okay. Would someone like to move the resolution? Which starts at page 3, moved by Brian, second? I'll second. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the resolution to recommend, Black Hands Universal receive CBDO designation? Unanimous. All right, thanks, everyone. Now, something I realized I forgot last week was one of the first things I want to do. Before we begin discussing our public service applicants. Are there any conflicts that anyone would like to announce? I think there are a couple. I'll start. Even though I have no direct interest, Southside Community Center's executive director is my niece. And so there's a family connection there. But I otherwise am not affiliated with the center other than just as any other community member. Fernando?
I'm on the board of the park, of the Center for Community Transportation, which Michael Tompkins. Project number 18, the Michael Tompkins is a program of the Center for Community Transportation. Well, I'll probably keep it. So here's a resource, the question that I can answer for you. Probably should not go
So you're recusing yourself from discussion about it?
on 18.
Reminder for anybody recusing themselves from discussion at any time, just. We ask them to leave the table at that point and sit in the audience because we feel like it makes it clearer and online that that person is participating in the discussion.
But that does not mean that we cannot direct questions to that person if necessary. So in other words, if there was something we needed clarification for that Fernando being closer to the organization might be able to answer.
That's a really good question. I mean, I would say that since the other organizations don't have a representative present, during review, it's probably better to just create the question and send it to the organization.
Okay, thanks for that. One moment, please. Just try to get to the right page. Our first applicant is the Southside Community Center. The Community Resilience Hub.
I have a comment that I'd like to make about this,
I'm sorry about,
about the resilience hub.
oh, yeah, we're starting this discussion. I'm sorry, I was just trying to get to the right page, but go ahead, Steve.
Okay, so in looking at the applications under public services, it's clear that there isn't a lot of money. We could dole out a little bit of money to a lot of different organizations and really not get a lot of results. Or we could just kind of fully fund this request. And the reason why I wanted to make the comment early is because Ithaca, I mean, the International Building Code has some guidelines at how they designate different structures. They have what's called an importance factor. And the importance factor for a lot of different buildings in a community have to do with the ability of those buildings to survive a natural disaster. So hospitals, police departments, fire stations are considered really important. K through 12 schools come in next. And in this particular application, what I'm looking at is that they are asking the community to fund a building that will become a important part of the community to survive a natural disaster. There's no place else downtown that would actually fulfill that. The fire station is too small. Police station is located in an area where it's not really accessible if there's a flood. The hospital is on the hill, so nobody from downtown would easily be able to get there. The high school is in Fall Creek, so it's not really accessible to anybody downtown. So what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get at is, I think that this is something that the community actually needs. Their budget is $100, $105 higher than their ask. But when you really get down to it, there is no other application in this public services section that would actually get the results that this needs. I mean, that this would provide. It's one of those things where if you got a little bit of money and you really wanna get the most out of that money, this is one proposal that outshines anything. I mean, we've never seen anything like it, and the results that we will get from this is something that we can't get from any other organization or any other application.
Thanks, Steve. Mary?
Steve, thank you very much. I looked at this application and said, wow, I have never seen anything like this. And the outcome that as there's no other facility or anything downtown that will take care of the conditions that we are witnessing now in climate, and it's most likely going to come in the future. So I was making notes through all of these. I really like this project very much. Although I don't think we can fully fund it based on the small amount of money that we have in this category. But I would be willing to give them the whole bunch. Even though there are other applicants that I really like too, 2 or 3 others. Not a lot of them that are in this category. And some of them I think could manage on their own. And could fundraise some more and get the amount of money, because some of them aren't asking a great deal of us. So if they can be funded to a certain amount, I think some of these other applicants can hopefully be able to continue with the services that they are providing. So there's one other that I'm really interested in funding too, and they're not asking for it. But this is going to be for a large community. And I'm in favor of it as well.
Sorry, Fernanda, I just want a clarification, Mary. Our estimate of the amount of money that we may receive from HUD is the same amount as Southside's requested.
Yeah.
So I thought I heard you say that the Southside request, we could not fully fund it because we didn't have enough money.
No, that I did, I said, this is a note for myself. I said, I like this project very much, although I don't believe we can fully fund it. But I would be in favor of fully
I
funding.
see what you're saying. All right, yeah. Okay, thank you. Fernanda?
We have this committee, so we can have opposing voices. I had a problem with the application. The project is great. I mean, I have no problems with the project. I think it's out of scale for the funding we have and for the program we're trying to run here. The money they're asking for is, and page 8 of the application, it's for lights, it's for components, for certain components of the project. But this is not a make it or break it amount of money for this project. This is a $2 million project. I don't have, they didn't offer a budget in the format that we request. So I don't know where else they're applying for money. They may have indicated it, well, they did. They talk about the web and other sources, which I think is where they need to be going. FEMA and whatever, just trying to find the big pots of money to get up to the 2 million. Cause this 95,000 is, I'm not sure what, it's buying blowers and lights and a water purifying system. I mean, it's it's sort of like at the end, it'd be great to have them come in here and say, you know, we have 1,500,000 and we need the last, you know, 94,000 to complete it, and then, you know, you're giving them that last bit they need, but right now, it just seems like, I, there are other, I'd rather use this very small amount of money to mostly fund, if not fully fund, other of the projects that are very worthwhile on this list. Yeah, it just seems like there's a big project like this, just kind of out of scale with what we have available now.
I just wanted to, sorry,
Maybe you can touch on this, Lee. So why can't this project qualify for public facilities funding?
this is such a good question. Actually, we think it can. I'm not sure why they applied in the public services category, because actually a lot of the thing, as Fernando brought up, a lot of the components or alterations to the building, that's actually a public facilities issue. So this committee could recommend to move it into the public facilities category, because very few of the things that I saw in the application are eligible for public service, because they must. At first, I thought, for example, the emergency kits could be part of a public service, but you have to show the benefit, and that's kind of like a future benefit of being prepared for something, but you can't necessarily show that 50 people got those, like.
Can the whole thing go into public facilities or just the building?
I think like any other application, it can move to public facilities. There still might be things within the application that couldn't be funded because they're not compliant for that category, but they're mostly not compliant, what I could see in public services. They're mostly compliant in public facilities.
Okay, that was my biggest point was I agree with Fernando about the scale of the funding request for the amount of funding we have to give out. And then when I was looking at it, to me, I was like, okay, if it was moved into public facilities, then we have a lot more flexibility with how much. And when you look at the budget, which unfortunately, like there are a lot of things in the budget that I think we could fund under public facilities that maybe they didn't specifically request, but like if they're doing the entire building different, like maybe some of the emergency kits we can't fund, but we can fund something else from the budget, but I don't know.
So can you? I'm sorry if I.
No, that's it.
Can you fund the solar
Yes, we think that would be compliant.
and that there's no limitation for the amount of money?
Not in public facilities.
And did I understand your NIC to say that we or staff or the board could recommend kind of move or recommend or just move it into a different category?
I think we can just move it into another category based on your recommendation, because
Okay.
we don't have a process for that. I'm not sure why the organization submitted the public services application. It could have just been when they were looking at the various applications, that's the one that, I mean, they want to provide a public service, so that might have been why they applied there. We didn't have a prior conversation, so move it, and I don't know what the process would look like exactly, but we could, those committee could submit questions to them related to what you're talking about in public facilities. It is a little, we don't have a particular rule related. It's come up a couple of times, and actually, Brian, I looked at their budget too when I was trying to understand if we could fund other things, because there are a number of things that you point out on the budget that would be compliant for a public facility. So this application doesn't have the Excel sheet that we ask applicants to have. I suppose it's possible to ask them to do that.
Sounds like a good
I
solution.
mean, we don't have a rule necessarily about that. We do have a rule that an application must be considered as it stands at 12 o'clock noon on January 31st.
Right.
So, yeah, so that doesn't mean that we can't ask for more information.
Go ahead.
I think that the budget that they've submitted on this, on the Excel spreadsheet, pretty clearly points out where the funding sources are coming from and where the money is going to be used. So I don't necessarily need anything different.
That's it.
I don't see where the funding.
On this
sources are.
Excel spreadsheet,
Yeah, I see estimates and. A couple of things, but I don't see where the,
Like the secured funding,
Yeah.
yeah.
but like, I don't know, but I don't see like. Like who is funding the roof
oh,
and like who is funding the adaptive space use?
We do,
so on the,
we
at
will
the
look
very
into,
bottom,
we need that information, by the way, if they're funded, we do need to know what their matches are, that's something we report to.
at the bottom, it shows $400,000 from the city, $60,000 from the Park Foundation.
Mhm.
And
But I
then
guess-
they've got $391,000 cost sharing, and that looks like it's coming from the application. It looks like it, most of it, a lot of it's coming from Cornell.
So I guess what I would wanna interject and say is that I think there is a lot of information on the spreadsheet that they provided that's useful. Is it clear to you, Steve, that those funding sources are secured?
It's not secured, but I can't see the state saying no.
So all I'm saying is like in the Excel sheet, it has some detail that's not on this. That's what
Yes.
they submitted, so we can ask them for other information.
And actually on the last page too, under the fundraising initiatives, it does say that, Senator Webb's office has granted us $250,000 towards the project. The city is committed to setting aside $200,000. The Cornell professor has secured $25,000. So, and a pending grant application with Park. So the way I'm interpreting this, and I'm not sure if that's enough of a commitment, or if it means that these are actually committed funds, is that the Senator Webb, the money from Senator Webb's office, the city's money, and the money from the Cornell professor is all secured. Again, that's the way I'm reading this, but I don't know if that's.
Go ahead, Brian, and then I'll-
My concern wasn't about secured, unsecured, it was about what they're using the funds for.
Oh, so,
because
okay,
we would need to know for public facilities, I believe, what that is going towards and make sure that the funding, the public facilities funding that we allocate is eligible. So like, it doesn't say like Leah Webb is funding the roof or like
Mhm.
the park, like it says a little bit about the park foundation, but like, yeah, that's more where my concern was.
right, so we would need really our budget sheet submitted. But is that too late for that? As you said,
Well, like I said, I don't think there's any rules about the committee or the board making information requests to an organization, which that sounds like an information request. What is the rule is that whatever they submit at the deadline is what they can't like submit something right after that and put it in. So we have gotten in the past. I don't think this is like the greatest, but we've gotten applications that, you know, whatever, for whatever reason, they don't conform exactly to our format, and the committees sometimes still consider those. It depends on the strength of what the proposal is, or they don't consider them. So this committee is considering this, recommending that it go to the public facilities category, and whatever other information requests you want from them, I will make of them. And the other thing I would say is that, again, it's not that this is a deal breaker, but this is something that we do ask for. If there are funding commitments, we ask for some, like a commitment letter or something like that from organizations. Some organizations have provided those in their proposals, some have not. When, you know, that's something that we look for in the attachment. So sometimes reviewers want to see those, and sometimes reviewers don't.
Brian?
Oh, that was, I personally, I think if the request for information could be more information about what their grant, their other funding is funding out of their budget and maybe some more information, or can they provide a commitment letter at this point as a request for information?
I think
or
if-
is that-
I think if the reviewers request it and they wanna see it and they can provide it, then
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily need a commitment letter, but just, I don't know, I kind of agree that it's fairly clear what is committed and uncommitted. For me, it's more just the information about what those other funding sources are funding.
Right. And we do need to know if it is the fund, what we would be asked to fund is eligible, as you said. One question I had, perhaps I missed this in the application, was it's important that the building be secure, just in terms of, has it been deemed to be secure enough so that if there is a flood, and I believe in the past, that the water table in that area is high, I know that. In fact, Southside used to have issues with, I was on the board many years ago, used to have issues with flooding in the basement. It's not a finished, but it's more of almost a semi-crawl space. The water table is high there, so if there is a flood, would this actually function as a hub where people could get to? See,
On my way here this morning, I actually passed it, so I wanted to confirm it. And it is 2 feet above. It was built, I mean, it's amazing that before there was any requirements, this building was constructed so that it's at least 2 feet above where the water table would be. So you mentioned that there was a possibility of getting water in the basement.
no, it's a reality.
Yeah, I mean, so
Yes.
I don't think, and I have a feeling that in looking at maybe I'm interpolating, but in looking at the application, I got the impression that that was one of the things that they were going to actually eliminate, was the basement. And everything above the basement floor is above the flood stage. And they were going to add things to make the facility functional under those circumstances.
Right, because definitely like the electrical, the panels, everything. would need to
They're
be out of
moving it
the
upstairs.
Okay. Brian?
I didn't check the map, but is this building in the new floodplain?
Yeah,
Okay, so they'll have to floodproof it somehow, no matter what.
I think that it might be worthwhile to ask these questions of the organization, what kind of. I don't know, do they need to do an engineering analysis, or how they know that they can fulfill this function? I think that's a really fine question to ask them. My sense is that this, and actually I did ask the organization this, if this project is going to be a phased project, and it looks like it. From our conversation, it sounded like, yes, they intended that there would be various phases of this project, so not that that's related to my other comment about requesting information about its stability during a flood, but they're pointing out that, you know, they may come forward next year, and they may have various, you know, plans that they would, you know, proceed with based on, you know, certain things that's in first. But I should also comment that in every application, I mean, not every application, but it's common for us to find in applications that something that the applicant is requesting is not compliant, but other things in their application are. And that's the conversation that we often have with, I want to say often, we have those conversations because they're necessary. So I don't think that this application is unique in that it talks about some things that are not compliant, but we see other things that could be compliant.
yeah, but we also commonly make fund the component.
Yes.
Of what they're applying, and
Yes.
the budget or the project schedule helps us identify the cost of the different components. So we want to look at, so they talk about the exterior lights, the shelter kits, the blowers, the water purifying system and the rooftop solar are the things that they're asking for money from us. And maybe we can do some of those and not all.
I almost forgot, Cheyenne, who's not here today, submitted some comments and, said overall the project sounds great. Unclear what portions would be funded by this agency. But it could be scaled, you know,
Yeah.
so. You know, overall, sounds like she's in favor of it. Okay, so we'll recommend that, this be moved to public facilities. And some other clarifications, in terms of the budget as to who's funding, well, which monies are secured and what those secured funds are. What the secured and requested funding will be covering in terms of the budget.
Excuse me for being a little dense, but so moving to public facilities will make it, given access to other funding. I mean, there's no longer, it won't
It
be
won't
limited
be,
by on the.
it won't be limited, no. It's, so it would move to a category that has no cap on it.
Okay, and it's eligible for CDBG funds.
Yes,
Correct.
So by just, or I just want to make sure, so by moving into public facilities, we still have $95,000 or whatever it is for the rest of the projects. Okay.
yeah, that's for the rest of the project. So if it was moved to public facilities, it would have access to the general CDBG fund pool. Only public services have that cap, so other public services could be funded.
So there will be a conversation with this applicant about what we intend to do.
Yeah.
And the questions that are going to be asked for clarity.
Yes,
And so. Okay, so they would have an understanding about what it is that they need, how they need to move next. And the steps that they need to take to be in a category where there is more funding.
yes.
Yep.
I mean, but I will say, I think that basically, I mean, this is my understanding, we may need to discuss it as a staff, but basically they can take what we would put this application in a different category. We would not they wouldn't be altering that application, but there's really only, when I looked at the public facilities question, there's really only one question on the public facilities application that isn't on the public services, and it's answered within their application because it asks it, are you on a floodplain? And yes, they are, it says that. So we would just be on this, for example, right now we have nothing under public facilities. We've changed the matrix. This would go into that category.
Okay.
And then this application would still be considered by the IURA board. Reviewers would ask for other information would be considered in the review. Just like every other, I mean, I just want to point out, we're not doing anything different or special for them. We can do this with any applicant, ask them for more information.
Okay.
Great. All right, moving on to our second project, Finger Lakes Reuse for their materials access for Ithaca households in need. Request is a little under $26,000. Brian?
I'm not super familiar with the program and I don't fully understand it. Does anyone have a better understanding of what this program?
I'm in the same situation with you.
Okay.
Well, I do know that they, for as long as I can remember, have provided at low or no cost materials to not-for-profits and the clients of not-for-profits who are very low income and need household supplies. So this seems to be a continuation of that, maybe even a formalization of it. to serve 950 households within the city of Ithaca to provide essential materials and delivery.
I guess I just didn't know what, I'm sorry, Fernando, if you're gonna say something, but what materials and delivery. What is, like, what is that? Is that, are they giving people furniture? Are they, like, that's, okay.
Yeah, furniture, cause say all kinds of stuff that, well, anything you can think of, a household would need, they are able to provide. Mary?
Have you ever been to one of their facilities? They have two of them. So what's your understanding of what they do? Because if you are, my husband and I have contributed, we give lots of things, And so if you understand what you are doing as a person who donates. And there are needs around those donations, like you said, if you have furniture or something that somebody needs. And especially if they fall within a certain income bracket. And, or if they've had some difficulties in their life to trying to get a household, then they'll need those items and materials for that. So I actually like this project. I think it has benefits to the community. It's one of these, besides the first one we just talked about, that I think is really quite good, along with another one as well.
They describe in the text, some of the more, requested items are furniture, computer equipment, housewares, and clothing. But they have much more. I mean, you've been there, you see that they have anything they want.
Anissa and Steve.
Again, I think your question is just one that we could ask, for example, is there any, like, are there any items that they won't consider giving? I mean, yes, I'm familiar that for many years, organizations can go to Big Lakes Reuse to help their clients get set up, and the delivery aspect of it, I don't think I was aware of, which is very unique. But I don't think there's anything wrong with asking, like, if they wanted, whatever, how they decide. And would they give other kinds of materials that might not be strictly like dishes and bedding and stuff like that.
Different subjects?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, so,
I'm sorry, Brian, you were doing a follow-up to this?
No, you.
Oh, okay.
so I guess that what I didn't understand was they have things that people donate to the organization. They distribute vouchers to those people to buy things that are in the that people have donated. And so that's where I was really confused. I mean, it seems like this $147,000 comes from items that people donate, and the applicants, I mean, the people who ask for money or ask for funding through the organization buy those things, so it actually kind of generates the $147,000 on itself. Maybe I'm getting that backwards. I mean, what they're asking for is for staffing money, but I'm really confused about that.
Only a small portion is for staffing. The majority of it is to cover the materials. So in other words, instead of the clients paying for the materials, they're asking the HUD funds to pay for the materials. So $24,400 of the requested $25,944 is to cover the materials. Only $1,544 is for staffing. Is that clear?
I mean, they operate in a system where, yeah, they get donations and then they sell them. At a huge discount. And here they're working within their structure, so they're not in the business of getting materials and passing them along. They're the business, they get the materials, they put them in their store, they sell them. They're just getting, they want to use our money to subsidize those purchases for low-income households.
Eric.
I do have a question about the vouchers though. I want to know if there's a limitation. Is there a date? Do they they expire at a certain time? That's my question about the application.
I did see a note that said that, the voucher, the unused vouchers then are. After a certain time period, and I forget the amount of time, they're kind of reabsorbed or recaptured by the organization.
So I would want to have some clarity about, someone who has a voucher, does it say it expires within a month or two, or a year, or whatever that is? I did notice that those vouchers will go back into the system, but if a person needs a voucher and they have other things going on and they missed a deadline, and they have to reapply or get another voucher and then go through the system again. I just want to know what's the expiration date, what's the time?
Steve, did you get clarification on your question?
More or less.
Here's the sentence that may. Here's the. The gift card amounts not redeemed and. Are expired and returned to the fund for use for future participants.
Yes. Yes, I realize that, and that's actually what Carl was saying too.
Alright.
All I want to know is what's the date, what it is. If someone has a voucher, it's like one of these cards that you get, a gift card or whatever it is, that does it have an expiration date on or not? That's all I want to know.
So, a question for you, Anissa, is a few years ago, there was another organization that I can't remember the name, that collected furniture and household goods and delivered them.
Love knows no bounds.
Yes,
Yes.
now they went out of business a while ago.
Yeah,
They-
so
okay.
they changed their name, which I'm not remembering what that is, but I haven't seen them active in the community. What I would say is, I don't know if somebody else saw this in the application, kind of goes along with Mary's question, is is there a set value to each voucher? Like how much, or is it just like, you know what I mean, like, cause I could see it needing to be customized to. If it's an individual, if it's a family with an elder, or, you know what I mean, does it say that?
240 per household.
Okay.
Yeah, it says 180 to 360, and I think they just.
What do you see?
In the budget,
On the bottom of the application, what page does it say?
Yeah, I still see that there is a range that they,
yeah,
says the vouchers fall under.
for budgeting, they use 240 per household.
Okay, so somewhere on that.
So it sounds like there's general support for this, and, Cheyenne did note that it seems like a great project, and it could be scaled, as actually could all the projects be scaled.
Some more easily
that's-
than others. This one
Yeah.
gives us a 240 per household.
Right.
Figure, so.
And we do, and actually, at the public hearings, that's almost always the question that's asked of each of the applicants. Is it scalable, along with, if you're not funded, how will that impact your program? If you're scaled, how will it impact? If you're not funded, how will it impact your program? Seeing no other questions, moving on. The third project is Human Services Coalition, 211. Information and referral. It's an organization that applies pretty much every year for 211. I think everyone's maybe familiar with the work that they do. There also, will note that 211 is really important, as you may have noted, in some of the other applicants under this category who use it as a resource, as a referral. They work closely with 211. 211 also helps in terms of housing navigation. It's often one of the first places that people are directed to call if they need information around resources for housing, or pretty much resources for anyone in the
Certainly for
community.
transportation.
Yeah, transportation.
So,
And over the years, I know that they've created like special positions, but the housing navigator is one, during the pandemic. part of a project that we worked on with various stakeholders, where, they created the housing navigator role that actually does go to eviction court and helps people if they get, a pause to gather, kind of resources, connect them to legal resources, things like that. So they know a lot more than, it's more than just answering the phone. And I believe the transportation is somewhat, the deeper, is what I mean, is like a deeper level of service.
Fair?
Speaking of the transportation issue and this, under this applicant, I have some questions about this. So it says, in addition to previously described transportation projects, we're working with TCAT and a number of other transportation partners to implement the Ithaca Electric Transit Access Project. In the summer of 2025, TCAT will be launching an on-demand electric van pool service called IURA. Did we not have George Clements here?
That came to my mind.
I
yeah.
thought, what? So the question I had about that money that Jordan had secured with that visit to Albany, I asked what happened to the funding. So this looks like we're in it.
Hmm.
I'd like to know how that happened. And it seems to me Jordan isn't part, he wasn't around the table for this, and this was his idea. And did the work in the background around it, and then TCAT reaps the benefits from it. And the person who actually talked about this has nothing to say.
It's complicated.
I'm sure it is, and I'd like to know how you untangle that, because it doesn't look right to me.
First of all, this has nothing to do with the 211 application. This is ran. This is the TCAT led grant, NYSERDA grant that they received. 211 is playing a role because they're gonna be helping. If somebody calls, they'll be able to do references. But they're not, 211 is not organizing or they have nothing to do with it.
I understand all of that. I'm just
Okay.
asking a question because that's under this and they are mentioned.
They are.
So, no, let me finish.
Yeah.
So when we get an application like this and there is an applicant and there's a lot about TCAT in here, there's this, pretty much this whole section, they're mentioned a few times. This program is mentioned under this particular applicant. So I want to know the process about how this happened. That may be a discussion with TCAT or ask Jordan to come back and talk about this.
You're right, it would be a discussion with TCAT.
Yes. And with the Human Service Coalition too. These are the players. So,
So my understanding though is that the Human Services Coalition or 211
mhm,
is actually just as they were reached out to be a partner in something. So I think what I'm sitting Fernando was saying is any questions about this really need to go to TCAT
Yeah.
or Jordan, because then you get the two perspectives. But the thing is with TCAT, do we reach out to an organization that's really has not applied here or anything? Now, we have talked, our intent was actually to invite Jordan back. You remember when he was
Yes.
here in October, November?
mhm.
We were going to invite him back, but then we got into this process, and so we didn't have time, but the goal was to invite him back to continue that discussion. Brian,
This is a different topic, so.
okay,
So my only struggle with this application is like, I love 211, I love all the work that they do, and I think they help a lot of people, but. Now that I've seen it a second time around, I'm kind of concerned as to like. Where is the line between we're funding a project versus we're funding their operating budget? So, like, I don't like, there's something. like, I feel like there's always new projects and they're like tangential, so I guess they are kind of like they need more resources to help with those, but. That, like, I didn't see anything. In here that's like 211 is doing something new and we need funding to. For that, and that's my struggle because I wanna fund them, but I'm also like, okay, is this just their normal operations?
Yeah, interesting point. Fernando?
And I hear, I mean, it'd be, I think in a perfect world, all these nonprofits will. You know, use this as a boost and just to get established and then they. Run on their own, but that's not reality, okay? And we have many agencies here that are recurring. And always asking for funding for staff and, you know. It's a role we play with this money. Their role is to provide the service, do it efficiently, spend the money down. Make it easy for NISA and staff, you know, and I think as long as they're providing that important service in the community and they're an effective operation, I don't mind continually supporting them, because that's really, that's the reality. And this, they in particular, there's a couple that are just well run and they do get money from other funding sources. I like to see that, you know, we're not the only one, but then you create this really total dependency. That's something else. But they're, you know, we're part of their funding strategy. I suppose that's fair. I'm not comfortable with that.
And because they have other funding, and this is coming from the past more than once, that feeling that they are more able to make up any gaps that if funding that come up. So if we don't fund the 20,000, it's a relatively small amount of their budget. And so they are better positioned than some other organizations to make up that 20,000 if we decide not to fund it because of the limited amount of monies we have. So, okay.
I was just gonna say, like, I guess you could make the same argument about. All of the like reuse and historic Ithaca,
Yeah.
HETP, so,
Yeah, truth, yeah. I did have a question on the budget, and I don't know if you know this, Anissa. So under their expenses, there's a line for travel, including volunteer driver support of $39,540, which seemed a lot in terms of, the way I'm reading this is for, including the volunteer driver support, I guess would be the reimbursement for miles traveled, you know, and the IRS sets that. Whatever, 60 cents, or I don't know what the latest amount is, but the IRS sets what the reimbursement per mile amount is. And so that seems an awful lot. Are you familiar with the volunteer drivers? I know they have the fish and some, okay.
We can ask them about that. Obviously, it would be interesting. I mean, they're not proposing to use CDBG funding for that, but
Right.
it would be interesting to know how many miles that is. I mean, I don't know. I don't have off the top of my head what the reimbursement rate is, but I believe it will be mostly for fish, and fish does, my understanding of fish, Friends and Service Helping, is they drive people to medical appointments that are far away. So at medical centers, for example, that there's
So
no,
like Sayre or Syracuse, maybe
Exactly,
Rochester.
things like that, so. It still seems like a lot, so I don't know how many like trips that is, I don't know what the average distance of a trip is, but my understanding is like, the reason fish needs to exist is because the medical appointments are far away.
Right. Steve?
I mean, I took this a little bit different because I'm looking at it as including volunteer drivers. So it could be, in my mind, it could be that they actually have a contract with, say, TCAT or another one of the, or the DD or another one of these organizations that actually provides the service, and they just pay them as they're needed, because somebody needs to pay for the Medicaid driver system, and this might be some of the money that goes into the Medicaid driver system.
Fernando,
So the mileage rate of this base is 70 cents per mile.
how much?
70,
Oh, okay,
so this accounts for 564 miles. Doesn't seem excessive.
no,
No.
it can't be, has to be more.
That would be
You're right.
5,000.
In my math, sorry, I didn't clear my computer.
Was, yeah, okay, so, but as Steve pointed out, it probably includes, categories other than just the mileage reimbursement.
Yeah.
They're doing. All right, well, that's a question for them. It just struck me that that's a lot for travel. Okay. All right, Cheyenne, great program, would fund all if we could. We need to scale it. Relative to other requests, I might ask about with 50% of the requested amount of water. And we have scaled this in the past, as I said, all the applications are scalable if required. I guess scalable on our end, on their end, probably not. Any other questions? I mean, 211 is an organization we're familiar with and support. Okay. Moving on. Our next project is Catholic Charities of Tompkins, Tioga, a place to stay, which is the housing for supportive housing for women in need. And it's a 4-bedroom house, if I remember correctly. Right page here. There we go. Page 142 of our application. Request is for $10,000 to support the staff to do the case management, and intensive management is needed. And in the past, when we talked about scaling and means of reduction in the hours that are available to support the women in the house. And also they continue to provide support for women who have perhaps transitioned out of the house, but still need that support. Any questions? Mary?
I have a particular question. I just want to make a comment about this application. From my personal point of view, I think this is we do well to fully fund this application. There's a lot of work that goes in case management with women who are coming from very dire circumstances. And I think all the support that we can give them, and they're asking $10,000, and that's around case management. And the more of that you have because you could have one person who has a host of issues, and that takes a lot of support and a lot of time.
Yeah, I support this one too. I think maybe there's one other. And I don't even know if they're still open, one other supportive housing unit for women. Specifically, I know that there's one opening in has opened in Dryden, but in terms of downtown, this is the only one.
Magnolia House.
Magnolia, that's the other one. I was thinking of what, Sunflower on,
Sunflower is for people in reentry.
okay, but so that's male Anthony horses.
I think it depends on what their applicant pool is, because they had four units. No, might have been more than 4, 6, 2 buildings, 6 units, 8 units. So I think they had at least one for women, but the majority were men. But my question about this is, I thought I had heard that the building that apps is in, which is probably a confidential location, so we don't need to discuss the address, but, I thought that lease was not available anymore, so I don't know if they're moving the program, or if the landlord changed their mind, or if I was just misinformed. So that's something I will ask them.
Yeah, I did not see anything in the application that
Yeah, I
indicated.
mean, they don't mention it, so I might have my information wrong.
So that's a good question to ask. Though, as long as it remains in the city, I mean,
Yeah. We would, just a reminder, so I think what I was gonna say is this is a transitional housing program. So that is different than Magnolia House, that's, permanent, meant to be permanent supportive, although I think for parenting moms who live there, eventually they might, their children might get old enough that they outgrow the size of the apartments that they have, so, so I don't know how permanent it is, but.
yeah.
But they have
that's it.
leases and things like that, whereas in a transitional program,
Yeah, Magnolia House is pretty small, and each room is
yeah,
very
there's
small.
studios and one bedroom.
Right. Fernando?
Well, Mr. President, I'm also supportive. I see this type of programs and provide assistance, one-on-one assistance. It's really an investment. And if they can get participants, the help they need, get them on track, they just hopefully, right, they would kind of move out of that need. So I think it's very important. We try to support this. I like that it was a, small ask, and that they've secured other funding to assist in this project. I'm supportive of this.
I'm also very supportive of this one. I have a question more, I think, for Anissa. I saw some few applications that for their 2024 projects. Organizations have served clients but not drawn down any money. Is that just because they haven't submitted it?
Could be that, or it could be that they started. That when a contract is executed, it's the effective date is maybe the first day of the program year, August 1st. So a lot of times organizations are already serving, and so when the contract gets executed is when they put in their first voucher. So it could be either. So.
Moving on, our next project is the Learning Web, the Housing Scholarship Program, personnel support. Request for a little under 30, well, round up to 37,000. Steve?
Yeah, I guess that I'm just kind of parroting what I thought that Cheyenne mentioned last year is that, the ask is a large amount for the number of people that they are actually proposing that they're going to serve. And they're proposing that they're only going to serve 5 people. And they're asking for $36,000, which is quite a bit. And it doesn't really, per person, it doesn't really reflect a really good return on investment. And that's my biggest concern here, is that it's all for staff, but it doesn't really doesn't provide the community with a big return on investment because of the low number of people that are served.
Yeah, I looked at, the program has been in existence for 16 years through 2024. And it indicated in the application that there were 66 youth successfully transitioned out. So 66 divided by 16 is 4 and 1.25 youth per year. So yeah, it struck me again that it is a relatively small amount of young people, not to negate the importance of each young person being put on a successful path. But it is a lot of money for a relatively small return.
I think the other thing is it's linked to their IURA, their housing application, and as you know, rent is very high, they're serving 5 people on that housing scholarship. So my understanding is the staffing is for housing scholarships that's serving 5 people, that's why it's 5.
Cheyenne indicated that she would support it fully if we could.
And I put down that, I like, I do understand that numbers, and statistics are usually what people look at, but the services behind, you may not get what you think all of this money is gonna go towards because there's such a small pool. But when it is linked to some sort of housing, which is very expensive, and when it's linked to support for people who have real life issues, you're not gonna get 10 or 20 because it's just, there's a lot of resources and resources, not only money, that go into helping folks. So if you see a number like 5 and think, whoa, well, don't we have like 16 or more than that, but it's linked to other services that are provided, then you might get a better return. So if we're gonna say it like that, because of the expanse of the need.
And you will have noted that on the budget, the vast majority of the funds requested are for staffing. $3,800 for supplies. Otherwise, all towards staff. And as Mary's pointed out, that's in a program like this, the staffing is critical.
So last year they applied for 32,871 and they were funded at 13,100.
So scalable if need be. Any other comments? Moving on to our next project. On page 164 of our Catholic Charities of Conference Cuyahoga Immigrant Services Program, 30,000. Again, a program that's very familiar to us. We are every year they request supplies, request funding. Was really interested in this application, given the work they do and being in the crosshairs, or I should say the clients, well, the work they do and the clients they serve being in the crosshairs of the federal government. One of the questions I had was they have service goal, but with the pressures on the funding they face and federal restrictions, mandates, how will that impact their ability to serve the number of people they want to serve?
Oh, is that a question that we can answer now?
Oh, no, it's not a question we can ask, it's a question for them, yeah.
Yes, because the circumstances around what is currently happening in this country, right? Especially around, and if we have people or an organization that is willing to be upfront and to protect vulnerable citizens of vulnerable people, I'm on their side. To be able to, you don't become an immigrant or someone who's left your country just because. There are circumstances behind that make that critical for you to live and to be in a safe place for yourself and your family. And I would like to be on the side of those who are gonna help people. Not to impact them in some negative way, other than where they've already.
No, I agree with you. And, keeping in mind too, that Ithaca is a sanctuary city, there is a large immigrant population here. For me, no question that the work that immigrant services does and will continue to do is important. I just raised the question because I think that's a question for them. Will they be able to meet their goals? Another question I had was, it was mentioned that they place, they place, staff, I'm sorry, they place clients. Let me rephrase that. They help clients find employment. So my question was, are there formal commitments from employers within the community to place their clients, or is it kind of informal and they just direct clients to certain employers?
Good question.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I know that in the past I've worked with Cornell, because Cornell has a counterpart, organization, the department, because there's a lot of, people from other countries, working at Cornell. But I don't know the answer.
But I'm sorry, that was really a question I'm thinking about asking them. Yeah, and you, Brian?
If they're placing people into employment, can part of their application go under economic development, or would they still have to be in the public service?
I mean, if they chose to pursue a CDO, they could. But what might be difficult about for them pursuing the CDO is that 51% according to various criteria, and because they sort of two counties, they might not have enough local board members, you know what I mean, to make that 51%. It's possible, I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah, and the primary work is not really so much employment, it's helping immigrants
Yeah.
integrate into the community. Employment is certainly part of it.
I mean, they do have a designated employment specialist, so I mean, they do a lot of work with, helping people, as it's described, stay compliant with, reapplying for their green cards if they need to. The fees are very high, helping with that.
no, I was asking because I mean, I agree, I really want to support, like, as much as we can this program, and it was at this point that I started to get really worried about funding and the request, because there's a lot of really good applications.
Yeah, sure. And in the past, when we discussed scaling with Sue Chafee, the director of this program, what it means, because the funding is for staffing, it means that they would not be able to serve as many people as they would hope to. Any questions? Sounds like we'll support if we can. Perhaps we have to scale, but that's a discussion for our next meeting, when we will get into the tough part, which is how this small amount of money is gonna be divided. Fernando?
Yeah, well, it's I agree with everything's been said, looking at them, I'm surprised that they don't have one secured funding, and I also wonder if, given the atmosphere and how things have developed, if they're not really in a position to take, kind of grassroots support from the community. But yeah, that's not part of the application, just thinking. But I fully support, in fact, and I know that we're. It's critical because there aren't, they provide a level of expertise, and there's nowhere else to go. There's a couple other organizations that provide, logistical support for immigrants, even like furniture. But, they're providing the sort of more comprehensive services that are needed, including all of us.
Yeah, I don't think, I was thinking about the grassroots support. I can't remember seeing a funding request or specifically for immigrant services program. I know that Catholic Charities does events for the organization. I don't know how internally they divide up that support, but I've not seen a fundraising request or letter or event specifically for immigrant services. Maybe I've missed something. All right, so moving on. All right, historic Ithaca, work reserve, job readiness. Request for $20,000. The goal is to have 15 low moderate income youth and adults complete job readiness training. And again, this one is primarily for salaries. Small amount for insurance. And as we've heard in the past, this is a high needs population that they work with. And so the staffing and staff support is really important for the clients.
I have a question.
See,
I got a question for Anissa. This is linked to the ED application. And is it? Are they not allowed to use the ED money for staffing, or is it that they're?
They can, I think the reason it is because they need a large pool of people to be able to place. The executive director, or the economic development category, is dependent on placing people in jobs, not just preparing them for that. So this funds the readiness aspect, of getting people through their training and readiness, and not all of those people will be able to be placed. So that's why we're, because they work with a very young population and they might not, have enough work experience for that, but that's part of the reason that they choose to apply in the public services category for the readiness component of it.
there was another question for you, Anissa, if you know this. There was a mention of a green job starter kit.
Yeah,
Do you know what that is?
we talked about that a lot last year. We haven't talked about it a lot. I don't feel very prepared to talk about it. It's, I was not certain what the kit aspect of it was. But it was for working in sustainability. So we can have some more detail about that, or I can talk about more about. Like I said, it was just kind of in depth last year.
Yeah, unfortunately, another sector that's in the crosshairs of the funding cuts. Any other questions, comments on?
Well, I do like to have secured funding from Park Foundation. I do feel like our money helps leverage some of that.
Right,
So now Park also looks for partner agencies.
and of course, there are the sales from the significant elements that do support. And it's a relatively small amount. So we have a relatively small amount to do. Yeah. Okay. Let me just do a check here. We're halfway through. How are we doing? Need to take a break, stretch?
Break.
All right. 5 minutes?
So discuss. Did you already discussed that 84% reduction? Did I miss that part? In staff for HUD, community development?
No, we haven't talked about, we've just been reviewing the,
Okay.
so that, I think next week when we start talking about the funds, and then also if we have time. start contemplating about contingencies, because we'll have to come up with contingencies, which we do every year. Because we don't never know, even in years where we're projected to get money from HUD, how much we're gonna get, so we have to come up with contingencies there. But this year, of course, we have to include, if there's absolutely nothing coming from HUD, what will we do? The next project is Catholic Charities Security Deposit Assistance, and this is to add some extra hours for Catholic Charities staff to ensure that their security deposit recipients are successful. Questions, concerns? Well, I had a couple. One of my questions was, are the, and I have a vague memory, we've asked the Catholic Charities this before. Are the clients new to the area? Or maybe the question should be, what percentage of the clients are new to the area, and how many are just moving into a different apartment? Or say, have aged, left their parents' home, and are now seeking their own apartments.
I don't remember asking those questions before, actually.
Another question I had was, they did mention that some landlords refuse to accept the housing choice vouchers, which is illegal. Now, I don't remember if that's in New York State or Tompkins County. But are those,
People, yes, it's, I mean. But it's a known practice.
right, and so my question was, when they run across that with landlords, do they report those landlords to whatever authority it is that deals with it? Again, if it's illegal, it's gotta be somebody who deals with it.
I mean, I think that. One thing to remember is that, units need to be inspected, need to be eligible for a housing use voucher. So landlords can also refuse to have their units inspected. I mean, okay, yeah, I think that's a.
But there may be ways to get through it. I think Mary had her hand up first, and Steve.
I have a question about this particular question too about vouchers or whatever for, because the last one on historic Ithaca, at the bottom of the page, I had a question too about, and this is crossing over to this particular one about the charities too. So it says a source of income discrimination, because there's a false belief among some landlords that LMI individuals with housing subsidies are bad or unreliable tenants. So why do the landlords think that certain people are unreliable?
It's a widespread problem that many service providers discuss, is that there's. I mean, they don't, I think people who. Are denying, who don't want to serve housing choice voucher recipients are working under assumptions. Stereotypes,
Yes,
hearsay things that they think, so I don't. So I think that's what that's fine.
I think too, we've seen next door there at Asteri, there are some folks who live there who have caused some real problems in that apartment building. But then all the residents get painted with a broad brush for issues that are caused by just a few people. And it reinforces perhaps existing stereotypes of low-income people equal crime and, all the stereotypes we're familiar with. It's unfortunate, but I think it's a reality.
yeah, I realize that, because I am who I am in this body, so, but this needs to be talked about with landlords. There needs to be some sort of discussion with, I don't know if these agencies have, sit down, they have,
Absolutely,
and you still get the outcome, the same outcome.
yes.
Okay, because a few people have been, but another another part of this too, is when you are a landlord and there could be a screening process or whatever, because there are people who are low income folks who just need a place to stay, a really good place to stay. It needs to be safe for them as well. Safety is applies to everyone. So if you have a broad stroke about who is going to be appropriate and who isn't, that's just. And so the question too is, what recourse do people have around this when landlords just say, I don't know, I don't need to take this voucher?
So a couple things, there've been various projects around town. Before the pandemic, I was part of a, community-wide. Not a conference, but a workshop, a day-long workshop to educate landlords through the housing choice voucher process, discuss, various concerns that people come up with, hopefully debunk some myths, help them meet the staffs of the public housing authorities that issue the housing vouchers so that they could know who they'd be talking to or get direct contact, etc. That's not the only thing that has happened in the community. Various things have happened, including trying to speak to the Landlords Association. So, and one of the points that I think a lot of service providers and people who are in, have a housing choice voucher try to point out is that this is a very secure way of getting rent paid. Landlords are guaranteed this rent, this portion of the rent, the tenant pays 1/3. So there's a lot of security in having, housing choice voucher, renter. Landlords continue to make their decisions based, I think, on a market where there's plenty of other people looking for housing. I don't know, I mean, yes, source of income, discrimination laws were passed in 2019, right before the pandemic. I believe, I'm just Googling right now, something I should know, it's the New York State Attorney General's office that would, or the New York State Division of Human Rights, both of those are difficult entities to get to. But those would be the, enforcement agencies. They have, I mean, there have been suits brought. I can later research that. I don't have that at my fingertips, but I could tell you more, but it's a practice that continues.
And what's interesting, speaking of stereotypes, college students. Right, you hear stories of apartments being trashed under, drunken bacchanals but nobody turns down students.
One thing I want to say, and just may clarify, is that one of the main points of the source of income discrimination is that landlords are prohibited now from saying in their ads, we don't take housing choice vouchers, or things of that nature. So, as I recall, when the legislation was coming forward, it was about helping people get in the door with their applications, and then they could, the landlord would consider their application with anybody else's, they would meet that person, be able to talk with them, etc. I don't know that there's, fair housing testing can occur, which is where two like applicants apply for two testers who have like qualifications. Everything else about them is the same on paper, except one would have a housing choice voucher and one wouldn't. That's a way to try to show a pattern of discrimination, and then something like a lawsuit could be brought. The fair housing flips and faps. Fair housing organizations normally do that, and the one in our community or in our service area is called CNY Fair Housing. They do that in their service areas. I don't recall them having done that recently in Ithaca. They have a very small budget for a huge territory. But, so those are, that is one way that a suit might be brought. Because then they're able to demonstrate if there's a pattern of discriminating against like candidates when one has one thing different, whether it's race, whether it's income, whether it's having a housing choice voucher, a disability, anything like that might be in the protected classes. But I see that I'm still not answering your question.
Steve,
So this program could also be funded through the $96,000. I mean, this person could also be funded through the $96,000, no?
The reason that they're applying in the public services category is because it's for CDBG funds. They both those projects are applying in the home category for the scholarships and the security deposits, and home funds cannot be used for staffing.
Okay,
So that's been a longstanding issue with, a question that they've had is, well, how do we carry out this project? It requires staff people when we aren't, there's no way to be paid, for our staff. So their solution is to try to apply in this category.
okay, thank you.
one other question I had, Anissa, was, it's mentioned that, the number of homeless, families in the, Ithaca City School District has gone up.
Mhm.
But the, Housing for School Success, was canceled, if I remember correctly, by ICSD, but it sounds like Catholic Charities, I think there was one other organization maybe mentioned also about, families in ICSD. So it's still working with those families. But I just wanted to get a correction or confirm if I'm correct, that ICSD is not a part of the Housing for School Success anymore, even if the program exists anymore.
That's correct.
Okay. Even though how the homelessness in the district's going up. It's unfortunate, but okay. Cheyenne, fully supports funding this 100%, as I do. But yeah, we will get to that discussion at another point. Any other questions? Observations about this? Okay. All right. Moving on to our next application. So this is, Fernando being on the board of this organization. This is Bike Works Community Bike Shop.
So note that Darren has left the table and has recused himself from this discussion.
Thank you. Should make that a form. So this is to increase access to bicycles. And also for free maintenance and skills training. Serve 100 people, 100 community residents, which is great, all low income. I like this project, I like the description, and I think it's, well, we'll speak personally, it's evident that many people cannot afford cars. With a bicycle, you can, ride your bike to the bus stop, put your bike on the bus, and then get to a stop that's close to where work, get on your bike again and pedal to work or school or whatever. But this is something that's really important. The city has made an effort to put in bike lanes, and I think my understanding is that more are coming.
Yes, next week.
But it is next week, okay. But it is relatively high ask in this category for a limited amount of money. Don't think I had any other questions for them, and they had applied last year for funding. I don't remember if it was specifically for this purpose, but I think it was, or something like it.
It was more than like mechanics and things like that. I think a little bit maybe for this, but I remember it being a lot more supplies and bike mechanics. But they seem to have found other funding for a bike picnic, because I thought I saw it. You also noticed. And this is something maybe just to clarify with them, that. It says that they won the $15,000 grant from Jessica Tompkins. Transportation Council. But they listed it as unsecured. Money, but. If they won it in 2024, I would assume it's secured. But I know we can't.
But the head, no, I think it's the heading on that paragraph says the unsecured funding. And then it has 1,800 in kind from Park Tools. 15,000 from Ithaca Tompkins County Transportation Council, is that what you?
Yeah, that's what I was.
Oh, Mary, so.
Just have a practical question. Look out the window, what we can see, we have a lot of bad weather, and who's out on a bike now?
I saw somebody riding in this morning on a bike.
Well, good, but you saw how many people?
I ride my bike in bad weather.
Good, but how many other people?
I mean, I see people all the time.
Yeah.
I think I'm constantly amazed by the people that are riding their bike in bad weather, because that's the
Yeah.
transportation.
I,
like that.
I don't, I live on a hill too.
I see them climbing up West Hill all the
I'm
time.
on my feet too, not on a
I
bike.
see him come going up in front of my house every day.
Okay, good, but I do wonder about a population that we're wanting to support. How many of those people, because we may be coming from someplace very different. Wait, you're on your bike, you're a biker.
Mhm.
You're on your bike, you're a biker. I have neighbors who are bikers too. Someone who's in.
Oh, you're saying about whether is that their only means of transportation?
Yes,
Yeah, that happens all the time,
what,
especially a lot of the people who are homeless. And a lot of the people who are underhoused, that's their means of transportation. I mean, in the city, because of the rents in the city. They're so high that a lot of people live outside of the city. And that's the only way they get back and forth, because there's no bus service. If you lived on Hector Street, you'd see, it's constant, morning going down,
yes,
afternoon going up. There's lots and lots of people who, that's their only means of transportation,
Year round.
Yeah.
year round, yeah, no matter how bad the weather is.
that was my question. I mean, when we lived in Germany, I saw that all the time. I just don't, I'm not on Hector Street either.
Mhm.
But I do walk up there and I do see bikers sometimes. If Shelley and I are walking, usually it's not this bad. It is now. It's just a question.
Yeah,
So if there are bikers among us who are out in this kind of weather, I'm just wondering how many other people who have particular needs are biking around the city as opposed to maybe taking the bus.
yeah, in fact, sometimes I feel really, like if you are over by where Lowe's is, I mean, there are people that's a constant flow of people going back to the camp behind Lowe's and behind Walmart. And it's amazing how bad the weather can be and how cold it can be. And they're out there without gloves, without hats. So, I mean, I would like if Bike Walk Tompkins were to suggest buying things like winter clothing for these people, because that's one of the things that I see. I offer gloves. If I've got gloves on me, I will offer gloves to people who don't have it, because that's a big problem in the city.
Yeah, that's part of what I would think well, and if it's downtown, it's flat. If you're coming from elsewhere, from one of the hills, and you have to come down, then you have to go back up too. Most of those, some folks I think that. But I'm thinking about, many much rather walk or maybe take the bus.
Well, I think a couple things. One is people can put their bikes on the bus.
They can.
If they've been riding their bike
They can.
and the bus will take them somewhere. I think people sometimes do have to make the choice to walk if it's too icy,
Yes.
but walking takes a lot longer,
Yeah.
obviously, so I think. The walking would be the temporary measure until they can use their bike again. I mean, and I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know, it would be interesting if. I don't know if they have any. Information about, maybe I just didn't look at their application in the right way with this particular lens, but like. Of the people, I mean, they make a point, they're serving people for whom cycling is their transportation, their primary side.
Yeah, that I was gonna point that.
So
out
there's
too.
secondary, or maybe it's like, I think a lot of times when we talk about bicycling being somebody's primary transportation, I don't know how that necessarily dovetails with taking the bus. I think people will take the bus if it gets them a certain distance, or maybe they wanna ride their bike in nice weather all everywhere. But the point is I think that taking the bus is a fill-in for when they can, and same with walking, I would say. So
And then-
those are like complement.
So the question that I would have for them is the subscription for data collecting software, what kind of software are they talking about? And why would they need to use CBDG money to purchase that? And I'd also want to know what is this additional outreach trailer gonna do? What do they anticipate that the outreach trailer is going to accomplish, and what's gonna be on the outreach trailer?
So what is the outreach trailer for and what's going to be on it?
Yes, yeah, what's
I
it?
thought I read what's gonna be on it is, it's a way for them to. When they hold a pop-up events, so they load up their, the stuff they're gonna use for the pop-up, like maybe helmets and, parts, tools. And then go out to infield, for example, to, do a repair, pop-up there.
Maybe I missed that.
Can I ask a question too? Is there another bike repair shop in town too? We were talking about them last year.
Ribs, recycle it,
Ribs.
because bicycles, though, they recently moved out of the building they're releasing from us on Buffalo and Meadow. And. Right now, I think they're back within the South Side building, but. I'm not sure if they're even operating right now, because they were looking for an alternate location.
And I could be mistaken, is they're working with Kimberly to reuse to. Secure a site, I don't know if it's on that parcel, but I think it requires, I know that they need a shed and some other things, so they're not operating in. And I don't know, I'm not exactly sure where the. Bike shop clinic would be situated.
So I'm sorry, Brian.
I just had a couple of comments. I don't think, I mean, I have the questions that I think are always gonna be asked about scaling and things like that, but I do like that they I think one of the things we were talking about last year is them going to different places and doing pop-up events and looking at the amount of places that they've gone to. I really liked that. They seem to have done a lot with elementary school, Open Doors English, Community Center, a lot, Southside Community Center, Greater Risk Activity Center, all of those things. And they did say that in 2024, they saw a 189% increase in participation in all their programming. Which is another, I feel like, good thing to see in terms of thinking about awarding funding.
And Cheyenne's notes said, well, again, how is this scalable? But also. I'll just read what she said. If we do decide to provide funding, 10,000 at the most. Great program, but we have minimal funds. Recommendations for minimal funding. Project is a little vague. It's a big category for our funds to go to wages. And the majority of our funds, 24,000 of what they're asking for would be towards wages. And then small amounts for some of the other non-personnel expenses.
Steve, I don't know if you noticed, and I don't know if this answers your question about what the software is used for. But at the bottom of what's printed on the page 4 of their application. It says we have a point of sale system and a link spreadsheet that keeps track of when a bike was sold or donated, who bought or received the bike, contact information, how much the bike cost on a sliding scale, if money was exchanged, you know, they didn't get it for free, what accessories or parts were purchased or donated, and
Okay,
records of one-on-one conversations and check-ins with caseworkers and advocates to evaluate the status of.
so that would be the software.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Regarding this one? So it seems like the scaling, if we do decide to do any funding for this, we're looking at scaling. So that, and again, that's a question that someone on the board always asks of each of the applicants. Okay. All right, Fernando, you want to rejoin us? So we'll note that a member of the Aragon has rejoined the discussion. For our next project. Is a new project. New to us. Service and Unity Incorporated. This is interesting, placing people in recovery or various types of recovery, in volunteer roles where the organization serves or they get paid. And, the way I read this is that some of the funds go to Service and Unity, but the majority of funds go to the person who's providing the service. And maybe I misinterpreted that. Mary?
Well, I might be misinterpreting as well. I'm not really clear about this program at all. Maybe someone can help enlighten me about it.
Yes, Cheyenne said the same thing, but unclear as to how, to whom, the folks are being paid.
Unclear as to how to,
How any payment, so, someone is placed with an organization to do some,
Right.
2 hours of work a week, for example. How the payments work?
I think, the organization makes the payment to them, like a temporary staffing agency one. That's my,
Also, they pay service, the organization pays Service and Unity,
Yes.
which then pays the,
Yes.
the volunteer, or
that was
their
my
client.
understanding, but
That's the way I understood it
perhaps we
too.
should.
Any other questions? Comments?
I am actually emailing them right now, just to clarify, I see that they checked, that they are a 501c3. I thought in my preliminary conversation with them, they were fiscally sponsored at that time. So I just wrote to confirm to see if they've achieved the status on their own. They can be fiscally sponsored like bike walk conferences, but, I just wanted to see what the situation.
Because, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything.
I thought because it's Service and Unity Incorporated, that meant that they had.
Yeah, I mean. Again, I think this goes back to they can be incorporated within New York State as a not-for-profit corporation, but not be tax exempt. It's not the same as having the 501c3 status. You have to get that, and then you go to the next step, which is applying for 501c3
Yeah,
status.
it's true. Thanks for that reminder. One thing that I noted is that the vast majority of their funds are unsecured. So, $170,000 budget, but only 20,000 has been secured so far. So there's a lot that's still to be secured prior to them being able to operate this year. But again, I think a worthy project.
I have a question about. Who are the staffing partners? What's the network? I'm not sure what that means. I'm having a really hard time with this particular application.
How I interpret it is based on my reading of the application, also possibly the conversation I had with them is. That part of they see their work at it as, and there is in their attachments, I don't know if people saw this, but they had put out a survey to some employers. To find out if employers would be interested in hiring somebody on a very occasional basis. Would they be open to their kind of model? So their network, I think, is employers who are willing to have somebody doing a little bit of work occasionally or a certain amount of time. Where they can place them.
Doesn't appear there's any other questions, comments at this time. The next project is West Haven Farm. This is a food subsidy program. They're requesting, actually. We appear to be the only funder, $79,200, which clearly we cannot fund the whole thing. Or we could, I guess, but and this is for not going towards salaries, going towards the food, purchasing food to be distributed to low income communities. Steve.
Yeah, I have a real hard time with this application because of it being, us being the only funder. And it being an agricultural type of project. I mean, there's so many other opportunities for agricultural funding, that this wouldn't seem like the first place that I would consider. I would think that an agricultural entity would look for money. Maybe this isn't the first place, but it just seems kind of odd that with so many other things available, why apply to HUD for funding for an agricultural type of project?
I'm sorry, I grabbed my head. I don't see it.
Or
I just, they state there's a very limited funding opportunities for this type of project, so maybe we can ask them what to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah,
Because they're like, cause I think it's for. Like, I think there are a lot of funding opportunities for agricultural operations, but if I was reading this as this is for. Food for the households to like buy food.
yeah, we can see it.
So, yeah, so that's how I was reading they were using the funding for. I actually really like this project. I agree that we can't fund the whole thing. I did like a really rough calculation that it was like, based on the numbers they gave, like 10,500 for 10 households ago. So it could be one that's scalable, but I would be interested in maybe them expanding on like their other, like why they can't fund, like why there's no other funding opportunities.
Yeah, where else did they approach maybe?
Yeah, but I like the project overall. I just think it has to be scaled.
The only other, I'm sorry, Mary. The only other thing is that this is the same, I don't know, is this the same project as Groundswell? Or is it a different part of, the the farm up there as groundswell. So I'd like to know, is this groundswell under a different name?
Well, no, West Haven's always been a separate entity.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
These aren't their founding owners, but, and, I'm sorry, Mary.
I like this program too. Agricultural and farming, or food supplies are really close to me, because I'm a gardener myself. And I know that fresh fruits and vegetables are really expensive. And they're sourced and how they're sourced. And they mention it in this application too, the very people that harvest those fruits and vegetables are not likely to be able to afford them. So when you look at it from that point of view, and knowing that the expense of fresh fruits and vegetables, and they're not going to, the price of them are not gonna go any lower in the current administration. Everything comes to pass what's being suggested. There's gonna be less and less of that for many people, and it's gonna be completely out of reach for people that perhaps maybe have access right now. So why they haven't chosen, or why they did not have any other means of having this project go forward. They don't have any other one. There's a big ask from us, which I think is a lot. I do recognize that what they're attempting to do is noble. It's a noble task that they're doing, because they're not asking for anything for themselves. They're asking for a group of people who don't have access. So the question to ask about other supports is a good one.
I think that they're, at various points in their application, like on the printed page 2, at the bottom. They mention other sources of funding, like we've already secured funding for our program through November 2025. Well, that's part of the program year that they're applying for. Our program year starts in August. So I understand that it might not be, they don't have funding for the whole year, but what is that would be considered match funding. So
why didn't it?
I think that there might be a misunderstanding of what we're asking for in the Excel. Because I think they're thinking of it as like, we have this gap that we need to fill, but they discussed it says that sources include a sub-award from New York State as well as private philanthropy. So what are those other sources? And at another point, they describe it, and this might be referring back to what they just said, November 2025. At another point, they talked about like, we are asking for this to be able to continue our subsidized food program. So my sense was that there are other funding partners, they haven't been articulated. And I noticed in the attachments that there's 2 either letters of support or letters of commitment that mention dollar amounts in those letters. So I didn't know. I read that to mean that maybe the organization was matching that amount in kind or another way, or was the organization saying that it had that amount of value to them? I'm not sure. I need to look at those attachments again.
I think Brian will know.
Okay, actually, that brought up some of Mary's comments, brought up some questions for you, so.
Okay, so on the same topic, I just want to say, I read that sentence on page 2 differently, that they are saying they have funding through November. Thinking then, and they're seeking funding from us for 2026, meaning they won't get any funds from us until November.
Yeah, I
And so-
get that, but I think that my point is like November is still part of the program year that this funds.
Okay,
I mean, we have a very weird program year that's so hard to really
right,
understand.
and maybe that's.
And they're not thinking, I mean, obviously they were not thinking like, oh, August 1st is the 2025 program year for us. I mean,
Right.
but it was still would be supporting the project during part of the time that we would be.
We have to keep their farms. You have a growing season, so I think I noticed that too. They're asking for something for 2026. Is that?
Yeah, I think the timeline works. What I'm
Yes.
just saying is there is funding, the same program year that we run, there is some match funding in there. It'll be useful to know what the match funding is.
Okay.
Cheyenne, is a, great project. They need to find other partner funders. We could fund at a reduced scale. So again, as Brian pointed out, it is scalable. So go ahead, Brian.
So I wonder if, the things that Mary said brought up a question for me, because this is a. You know, a private working farm, so is their cost just their cost to produce the food? Or are they making a profit off of this?
Yeah, that's another thing I noted is to ask for their tax filings,
Okay.
because they are for
Cause like,
profit, they're not.
yeah, cause like I would fully support it if it's $33.50 for them to produce the food and give it to. The household, but if that, like, is more, I don't know, it's like, yes, I wanna help them as a. Like a small.
So
farm,
would
but
any
it's
of these funds go towards profit is the question?
Yeah.
Agricultural tax. Tax form is.
What'd you say?
It's an agricultural tax form is worthless.
Oh, are they? Okay. Oh, well, it'll be in education. Okay, I'm looking at,
Sorry, I had two other questions was. Is there a farm in the city of Ithaca?
No,
it's
27?
not.
Okay.
It's in the-
So how are they tracking who are they serving? That
well,
they are,
they
like for,
have, it looks like they have collaborations with organizations inside the city. And those organizations, like, I would be interested to know what the selection process is, like, is, because one thing that public services need to be available to the public, I mean, and then, sure, there might be a limited supply, but how are, the selection process has to be open, so it'll be interesting to know, or informative to know what the selection process is.
do they have to track? Like, do the people they serve have to be in the city of Ithaca? Like, do they, like, do we need the addresses of who those people?
Normally what we do is we've done it different ways depending on what the organization needs, but yes, sometimes we feel that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was my, like, how are they? I guess like,
And
I think it's a similar question to what you had, like. So like, how are they selecting, but also like, how are they tracking for HUD that they
so
are serving?
what they
the
normally,
water?
this type of project would normally do is initially, however, people got selected into the program, like I could see like it being a lottery. Let's say that, because lotteries are open, like everybody who's associated with an organization that's partnering with them. Anybody that wants to apply applies, and then there's a lottery or something like that. Then they would need to fill out a self-certification form. To show that they're low or moderate income, and then the form normally asks how big the family size is, other demographic information. Confirms that they live in the city of Ithaca, those are some of the things that are normally on the form.
No, those are my questions.
But related to that, the way I read this is that the distribution will be through, Ithaca Kitchen Cupboard and the Southside Community Center and Food Pantry. So are those entities, it sounds like they would be the ones tracking. So it's not just you give the food to a distribution point within the city. It has to be whether the clients be coming to that distribution point are city residents. And so,
I understand, so maybe I'm reading this, sorry, I didn't. finish.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was thinking in my mind, like this would function like a CSA where.
Yeah.
Where people, the same people who are like, it would be the same people each week receiving the box.
Right.
But those people need to get selected into the program, and they're selected into the program is when the demographic and income information would be. Collected to ensure that they're eligible for the program under HUD standards, and not 100% don't have to be, but we like the fact that they're trying to make it 100%.
But I mean, the way I'm looking at this is. That they're going to have. 30 to 60 boxes per week. That's gonna go out. To three different locations.
Mhm.
And they place a value on those boxes, based on something. And it's a lot less than it would be if. Okay, so if you're a member of a CSA, you get a box of food and it comes to you and you use that box of food, and then the next week you go back and you get more things from the CSA. I'm having a hard time justifying funding this because of the agricultural nature of it. I mean, I've never heard of an agricultural entity applying for HUD funds. And it's just because there's the Department of Agriculture, there's New York State Ag and Markets. There are so many different places for agricultural operating capital. And this seems to be, is you're looking for operating money for this farm. And there are so many other things that where operating money is available.
Yeah, I don't see it as operating money. I see it as subsidizing the food purchases for low-income families.
It's always similar
And it's kind of
to, yeah.
indirect, but maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if this was the right analogy, but you might remember last year, Ithaca, Shared Kitchen Ithaca, the fun, I mean, it's totally different category, so don't do that, but the funding was to subsidize the utilization fees of the kitchen.
Right.
So I kind of see this as like, in my mind, it was kind of a CSA model, and it's subsidizing, it's paying for the subscription to the CSA. On behalf of, but you're saying that there should be funding available from other ag related sources to give away food?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, no, not to give away food, but I guess that there isn't enough of an explanation as to. So,
It sounds like it kind of goes back to like the questions that other people have articulated around like, where else have you applied for funding? Who else has funded you? What exactly, I mean, from the business side of things, it sounds like you want to hear more from.
well, my first job, which was 1,000 years ago, was making loans to farmers. So the farmer had to come in and provide something that shows they either wanted money for equipment or for a building or for operating. And this seems like it's money for operating expenses. They want to be able to plant whatever it is that they're planting. They're going to use some type of fertilizer for whatever, for making the crops, some type of pesticide, and the labor to harvest and weed the crops. They didn't spell that out in their application, which would have been nice if they kind of spelled it out in the application. But the only thing that the result is that they're going to give away some food. But it doesn't really necessarily amount to $79,000 worth of food that they're giving away.
Sure.
Or how do we know what the bottom line was of the $79,000 worth? What's the input? And as I said, I'm looking at this application as they're asking for operating expenses in order to generate the food that they're going to give away.
I don't
And
think so.
maybe I'm completely off the base, but maybe I know too much in order, and I'm looking at it from the others, from that perspective instead of.
Well, so they offer CSAs at X dollars per person. Some of their clients are able to pay it out of pocket, some are low income and can't pay it, so they're asking us to pay that X amount of dollars for low income clients. So we're not directly, so the funds isn't going to them to buy seed or.
Yeah, that's what a
fuel
CSA
or
does.
fertilizer, is to pay the system, right, I
No.
guess ultimately. But they're not asking that for us, they're asking us to pay the CSA fees.
When
for
you buy
local
a
people.
but when you buy a CSA, you pay for your CSA upfront or ongoing weekly. And they use the money for the CSA as operating expenses. That's the way a CSA operates.
But that's kind of like saying if we provide funds for rental assistance, it's actually going towards taxes and water bills for the landlord.
No,
And
it's
indirectly
completely-
it is, but I see it as the same
It's
thing.
it's completely different. This is an agricultural business. And they're going to provide a CSA for a certain group of people. And the CSA model works, is operating expenses come from the CSA participants. And that's how they keep the business going.
It seems like, what I'm feeling like is what's lacking is cost documentation. Or a business plan that shows how they arrived at the subscription cost. I mean, it seems like if we had that information, we'd understand more about why the subscriptions cost the amount that is set at, which is, I'm still a little confused what exactly that is. So it sounds like, I mean, I think a couple different things. It sounds like we don't know what the matching funds are, because again, when I look in the attachments, Ithaca kitchen cupboard, and I think also South Side. I'm looking at the Ithaca kitchen cupboard letter of support, or maybe it's commitment, because it says. West Haven Farm will offer weekly boxes of locally grown vegetables and seasonal fruit throughout the season. The current budget for this collaboration to continue after the remainder of their funding is utilized is $10,440. So I'm like, does that mean that the kitchen cupboard is paying the $10,000, or what is the current budget for the collaboration? It just raised a lot of questions. I didn't understand where the funding was coming from. And so I think to your point though, too, it's like, it would be useful to know how this business arrives at the amount that each box, are we buying a box at cost? Is that what the funding would be for, or is there a profit built in? I mean, those are things that I think it's kind of, I'm getting from your question, and those are questions that I.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, as I said, it's very confusing for me. No, from a CSA standpoint, that's how the CSAs, they use the money that their participants put in, and that's their operating expenses. Or they'll get a loan and they offset the loan payments through the operating expenses that the CSA participants put in. And from this application, I don't really understand that. I mean, it seems like $79,000 they're asking, which, sure, we're gonna scale it. But even with that, it's really odd to see an application for a farm asking for HUD money to create a CSA, I mean, to help develop a CSA. It's just, I've never even heard of anything like it. Maybe because I haven't been on a committee like this. But it's just really odd to see that.
I guess so I agree with you. I think that they're using it for their operating expenses, but the way that I view it, I think is more as Mary and Carl are viewing it, which is that like. And that was my question about the profit, and I agree with you. I think we need more cost breakdown, because the way I view it is, yes, they're using it for their operating expenses, but the beneficiaries are the people that are not going to have to pay the CSA fee. So I'm viewing it as, okay, the 10 households that are getting the food for free are the beneficiaries, because the way that I would like to view it, and I'm kind of hoping it is based on the cost documentation, is that we are giving them money to make the food for the beneficiaries, not a profit for them. So that's how that was what I read in the beginning. I think through this discussion, I was like, okay, that's really not clear, and we should definitely clarify that, but that's how I was reading the program and how I would like to support it. If it's something different, then I think that's definitely something to consider, but that's just.
So, yeah, some, clarification needed, Fernando.
Well, yes, and I see this as very much a subsidy for the cost of food and that being this public money and what we do, we need to know that that subsidy is not somehow fleecing us, you know, we need to know that 43 and 50 cents per household is, you know, it's a fair amount, and not a,
Yeah, we need a lot more
not
information.
somehow a scale.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward program. I agree that it's really neat to see agricultural entity come in, but, ultimately, you know, we're subsidizing food for low-income households. I'm more stuck with, you know, this is not following sort of the format that's, I think we prefer that they have multiple sources of funding and that we're contributing. Not seeing that, don't know if it's for profit or not.
I mean, they say that they're not.
Okay, maybe if they were, it's hard to make a profit
Yeah.
in this type of business, but, and is this gonna be a one-time thing? Is this year? Are they gonna be back next year? I mean, I expect this program, seems like there's a demand out there, so there's never gonna be a lack of need. But it'd be nice if these structures and whether they're not dependent on us. And we're not starting that way.
So a bunch of questions on that one. Okay. Moving on. Ultimate reentry opportunity beyond the box certification. Request of $67,131. This is to work with employers to address the barriers that folks who are returning from incarceration face and getting jobs, which we know can lead to recidivism. Let's see. Questions. Comments, concerns, Brian?
I had some questions, and one, this might be the same thing that we were talking about with historic Ithaca and like job readiness versus job placement, and whether this could be, like, is this money for job readiness, or if it's job placement, could it potentially be economic?
Big either.
I think we just, when I did technical assistance with them, we did talk about what category. My remembrance is that this organization does not have its own board at this time, it's fiscally sponsored, so again. They would need to meet the CBDO standards and the board of their fiscal agent. We don't know that we meet those, so in future years, they could, after the board is organized. They could potentially qualify with CBDO and apply in that category, but since they weren't there yet. They're fighting.
Okay, cause I was also just a little confused as to what exactly they were doing and whether it was like. Are they training people to get certifications? Are they just placing people in jobs? And I also kind of. I don't know, I feel like a lot of our funding is like for a program that is like, we are training people to be in this job, and this seems a little bit raw, like more raw. And I don't know, that's why I was like, I don't know if this goes.
Yeah, I saw this as a placing people in jobs, you know, trying to find employers. The project goals are, I think, pretty straightforward, sort of promote inclusive hiring or reentry clients, deliver reentry and trauma-informed training, and attention on addressing systemic barriers barriers. And so,
But
I'm not sure if what I see here that I saw in the previous applications also, you know, where we saw funder, doesn't seem to be any indication of finding other funding sources. It's gonna be a one-time thing. Yeah, so, and it's a high ask, so it's sort of like two things here, we kind of raise a few flags for me.
you know, and it's interesting, I read this totally different from Brian, that they're not working with formerly incarcerated people to place them in jobs. They're working with employers to train them not to be prejudiced against people who are formerly incarcerated.
I think actually the program does both things, but to be eligible for the part that public services should fund is the people who are getting jobs. Not that the training isn't valuable, but the job placement and navigation, I think, is more eligible than training. Not that it's not valuable, I'm not saying that. As a public service, training an employer, the employer, first of all, is not in the city, if it's IC. So this reminded me of an application that came forward a few years ago from OAR that wanted to have a training. I mean, it's an interesting proposal, but it involved a training component for service providers that then would result in services to community members. So it's the services to the direct beneficiary that we count, not a service provider. Not that it's not valuable to train that service provider, but those are probably not LMI people needing services. It's the services that result that we report to HUD. So this, when I spoke to them about this program, again, it's not that that portion of what they're doing isn't valuable, but the navigation aspect, the follow-up, kind of like, how is your job going? You know, is there, it sounds like they want to help not just secure a job, but keep a job. That I think would be eligible. I do not think that the research component of this, I need to look that up in HUD regs, but I don't think the research component of this would be necessarily something that we could fund. Not that it's not valuable, it's just perhaps not directly creating the benefit.
And the independent contractor, we don't really know what the independent contractor
Yeah, I
actually
think,
does.
actually that person, if that's identified, they might have more information about them in the, and what they do in the attachments. That's something I would.
Whoever it is, the contractor does some of the training, but also the, what do you call it, the data collection and analysis.
So, I mean, the 15 beneficiaries that are noted on the front page, I'm assuming those are people that would be placing jobs.
And now that you say, I'm looking at some of the descriptions of the employee or the staff who will be supported. There is the navigational support specialist, which will assist justice impacted employees. So there will be some direct work with the people to be hired. Fernando, I think I may have interrupted you.
So much from you all. As I read this, you know, I'm seeing now what you were saying.
Yeah, me
You
too.
know, that a lot of the services were, or a lot of the program is geared towards training the employer. I mean, page 2, I guess 1, 2, 3 are really not for the customers, it's for the employer, developing policies. And I guess it's a problem with, this is saying that's not eligible, no, it's nice.
That's Mary, then Steve.
Carl, I read it the way that you were reading it. It was about the employer, especially when they mentioned IC particularly. So train the employer to notice what the factors are that limited certain populations from being employed. That's the big umbrella around this. So, and how you work that out is add another element, because I think there might training for the employer. And the research, I think, came from this independent contractor. So how we get to the place of funding or considering funding an application like this can be kind of tricky. And there needs to be some clarity about this, but I understand, I really do understand what the ask is about. And why you would want to have employers aware of what the measures are for employment for certain populations. And how difficult that can be.
I will mention that URO has been doing this work, the Beyond the Box goes back before the pandemic.
I think, I just wanted to say that this is the type of, we've done this with other applications. And I'm not thinking of an example, but again, it's like a portion of the application could be funding.
Right.
Like the
Cheyenne says
it's
that could be
clearly within the public service category, and it sounds like they can. Like collect information on their beneficiaries, which are the people being placed, and can count that. So I think looking at it from that perspective, other things that they're doing, not that it's bad, it's just maybe not something that would be funded this round or this way. It does beg the question, and I'm not prepared enough. Kind of thought all the aspects through, because they didn't ultimately apply for economic development, but if it were an economic development category, perhaps some of the training for the employers would be more, could be more folded in. I'm not sure of that answer, but again, we're looking at, being able to place people who are LMI in jobs. And so the activities, the navigation around that, I think, would be eligible.
Steve, you would have.
Yeah, I mean, either I'm missing a page for my attachments, but the attachment I have doesn't really talk about the independent contractor, it's just a list of people. So if I'm missing a page, then.
No, I don't think so. The reason I said it might be in the attachments
Yeah.
is that's where we normally get supplemental information about the people involved in the project, and sometimes it tells us more.
Okay.
But it sounds like they didn't, I'm forgetting, is this the one that has just a one-page attachment?
Yeah.
There's two that have a one-page attachment.
I mean, so with the independent, it doesn't even, there's no real description of what this independent contractor, at least I can't tell.
So that might be a question to ask them, is what that, I mean, if you're interested in asking the question.
I would like to, no.
Just one more comment to it. I think they use Moosewood as a pilot, and how that worked for employees through this program, and this flexibility around what they're trying to do. So there must be there's a pilot, there's a structure that came through Moosewood that is being tried with other entities. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Brian,
So I have two other quick things. So on page 3, they have a whole section on funding justification and other available sources, and they've listed a lot of things there. So I think it would be, I would like to know more, what that is, because in looking at their on page 7, it looks like 10% of their ask is for the navigational support specialist, which is the person specifically assisting the employees. So perhaps because I guess like my question is like, if we are the only funding and we're scaling it so much or it's not eligible, like, is it worth giving them anything? But if they are getting other funding, perhaps we could consider the navigational support specialist at 10%.
Again, I was wondering
ask.
why
So,
the paragraph that you mentioned why some of those, or all of those sources weren't listed on the
But
project budget.
Yeah.
So it would give us more information about, because I got a little confused reading it. What was, seemed like some was secured and some wasn't, and maybe there were additional asks or whatever, but all of that I think would have been really helpful to have on the project budget.
Right.
Yeah, cause I guess I'm just, like, if they are going after other sources. And there's a possibility that they would get that money, I mean, 10% of their ask. Is down to $6,700, and if that's, which is, you know, I would be more comfortable funding something like that than more.
Just to note what Cheyenne had submitted, training employers is an amazing project. We cannot fund more than 10% of the whole thing, need other funders. And then she asks, why is Ithaca College, and you'll see on the first page, it talks about IC. And this is to implement the program with IC dining. Why is Ithaca College not listed in the collaboration section? Who at IC would they train? And then how would this be scalable? So yeah, definitely more details.
So, for example, and I know we're probably need to move on, but something that I thought is a little different than other workforce development type programs that we see is on the bottom of the, what's printed on the page is 3 of 9. Says that they would have bi-weekly group meetings, regular coordination between URO, the employer partners and consultants. I might have read that wrong. To track progress, troubleshoot challenges and refine strategies. For some reason, I thought that would. Sounds like the beneficiary is not involved in that, but it's about helping the beneficiaries stay employed is the impression I got.
Say that again?
I got the impression that that component of it, that bi-weekly discussion with the employer and URL and I don't know anyway, but that was about helping the beneficiaries retain their jobs, understanding what issues are coming up, how can we troubleshoot them, that kind of thing. Which I thought was a little bit different than what I've heard of other, a little more formal, I should say, a more formal scheduled way to do that.
Right, so it's not all on the employee to adapt and know, have a 360-degree view of what's happening. It's the employer has a role to play in ensuring that the employee is successful. And this is to help the employer achieve that goal of having successful employees.
Yes, I mean-
And that's the way I.
Yeah, that's how I got it, is maybe they're also helping, communicate to the employee.
It seems to be on 3 of 9. That there is a person that, I assume so, is still the consultant. And the lead data collection, assessment, evaluation is someone from in-house.
someone.
Well, page
And
3,
within-
the person
within-
is named.
Yes, the person's name,
Oh,
Yes.
Ian.
yes.
The other thing I wanted to say is that though, in that same section, number 3, I'm not sure how to read it, it says structured implementation plan. Phased approach that ensures assessments, training, and policy changes occur on schedule. Are those assessments of the person who's being placed in employment? Or is that assessments of the employer?
Yeah,
Because again, I think we would want to know a little bit about that. Or, I mean, I think it's just maybe simply funding the part of the staffing that directly relates to the beneficiaries.
As I was looking through more, there's also some more detail in their funding under fundraising initiatives that they kind of go through what. It's not everything that's listed in that paragraph, but a lot of it is there. so
Yeah.
Just because long.
Yeah, so I'm wondering why the secured stuff isn't in the Excel.
yeah, it's not clear at all. Okay. So we have a lot of questions for them. So our last applicant is Black Hands Universal.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm-
last thing on this,
Oh, go ahead.
on that funding addendum, it says, of planning to apply for 10,000 each to IURA
Yes.
and legacy. That's all. It says that they were planning
Oh, I
on
see.
applying for 10,000, but they applied for 67,000.
Okay.
Yeah. Inflation.
Eggs are a lot more expensive.
All right, so BHU Career Resources Project, another large ask, $60,850. And this is the coalition with all the trades, the skilled laborers and supportive organizations, so that they can expand their hiring of non-traditional employees that those organizations usually give apprenticeships to. Serve 15 people. We'll budget our funds would go primarily towards staffing. Staff salaries with some money, a smaller percentage of that going towards supplies, etc. Bernadette,
This program has been around a couple of years. I mean, I think we've seen this before. And
So the CBDO that you just considered is for their 2024 year to implement something similar. 2022 funding they implemented. Yes, they called it the apprenticeship program.
And I guess, do we have insights from that, or they've been
Yeah, we do.
successful?
That program's complete now. They did. Now I'm just trying to synthesize the information we had from them right before this meeting, but they did enroll, I think, 19 people. And it looked like they placed, I think their goal was 10, and it was very close to that, at least 9 if there was no duplication. The question I have is, my recollection was that one of the learnings that came from implementing the program was that not everyone was interested in connecting with the trades. And so then they continued to work with those folks toward whatever their goals were. So, I mean, whatever placements and whatnot still occurred, but it wasn't as exclusively to the trades as I think the organization originally intended, because they were finding they needed to adjust to suit their enrollees. So I just didn't know if that was reflected in that learning was reflected in this application, or whether they were reverting back to a previous plan of only focusing on the trades.
seems like that would be a front end. Question or determination. This program is to get you into the trades. And people would then have, at that point, say, okay, well, that's not for me. Or maybe once folks got into the program, they decided that they want more, but if it's specifically for the trades, why would you have people who
I
are
don't know, yeah,
not interested in trades being part of it?
yeah, no, I'm not exactly sure, I mean. I'm not sure. I have a few ideas, but, so it might be worth asking that.
Another thing I noted was that the amount requested does not match the amount on the budget.
Which budget?
Page,
That was the question that I had here, but. The budget,
it's in between pages 2 and 3. Public Services Project budget.
my question is that this isn't. My question is that this isn't their first application of this type, and they. The budget would have been, instead of writing it out, or maybe the way I'm looking at it is incorrect. I mean, this is what I see, I don't see it.
Our budget, yeah, it's in there. It's in between pages 2 and 3.
Okay,
So
well, then I
2
must
of
be
9 and
missing.
3 of 9, it's in between.
How do I get it to work?
Oh, is it not showing up in that Order?
Yeah, it's not showing up. So I can't really tell. All I see is, payroll, $68,850 consists of secretary, instructors and staff. And I can't really tell.
Are you in the attachment section instead?
No, I'm looking at the application.
Oh, it's above that. So you're looking at project description and it's the estimate based on, so payroll 68,850.
I'm looking at the project
Yeah, it
description.
might be just how it's bundled, the individual one.
Yeah,
Has
it looks exactly
All
the
right,
same.
right here.
Oh, I don't have that.
So if you wanna look here,
Where why is that missing? Thank you. Okay, if I can use this,
yeah. I mean, it's just,
okay, because I was totally lost here.
There is a problem with that, too. No
Oh.
problem with that.
Okay,
Brian?
You said the other ones were under economic.
I'm not sure.
development. Oh, Anissa, the other ones were under economic development. Is there a reason this one isn't under economic development, or is it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
If the other applications for Black Hands Universal were under economic development,
Why wasn't this one?
yeah,
Well,
is it the job readiness thing?
when we discussed what applications, the organization was interested in putting in. This could have been in economic development, but it can also qualify for public service. I suggested they might want to consider putting it in as a public service, considering how long the CBDO process was taking for their prior. They could do that. But part of the reason the CBDO process took that long too is because they needed to be able to take some interim steps to gather the information that we requested. So I think that we would have been working on a very, very long timeline. Because as with last year, the CBDO applications are due in February of this year. So last year it took them until November to have all the documents together and then. So I just, considering how much money they received the first time, it's below the public services cap, and even last time they applied for 20,000, which,
Yeah,
so. It was up to them, of course, but I think there was an advantage to applying.
okay, because I guess one, I don't know what people thought about their other application from last week, but. And I guess this is a big jump in funding, and I'm a little concerned about their capacity. Like, I actually think their deliverables that they've shown for the last few have been really good. So I think, and I don't know how they've been on reporting and other things like that, but some of the deliverables they've done with not that much money, I think are really good and shows that they are doing some really great work, but. Well, one, with the amount of funding that we have available, I think this is too big to fund, but the other thing is I struggle with their written applications quite a bit, even last year and this year, and I just, like, I have some concerns about their capacity to scale the program from what it currently is to this, like all of them go.
How about Fernando, you married?
It seems to me like you're right, they have that other application. Number 6, the house and daycare commercial property. Which was a big ask of 225. They have no funding for personnel there. It seems like they're kind of saving the personnel. Here, I almost would prefer. If they did what like the other agencies are doing, just pay the personnel costs for application number 6. Down here, but here is a whole nother project, so it's like, they're proposing to do this whole big project in 6, and then. This other program, and I don't know, is there the capacity for that? I mean, the ask here is strictly, well, that's part of the budget problem, I just want to see if maybe I'm misunderstanding. But they have, 3BG asked for 60,850. And then down here for personnel, they go 68. And down here for non-personnel, they have 17,000. And I'm guessing this 17,000 probably should be in this other, the proposed other column.
That was my guess.
But this 68, I wonder if it should be 60. Anyway, the budget. Yeah, I mean, the front page, it talks about 60,000. So it seems like the ask. I'm not sure, it's either 60 or 68,000.
Mayor?
Well, I took some time to read through this application. And I think I have an understanding about where it's trying to go. And I made a comment, a written comment, that I like the concept, and the concept to me is the possibilities of people who are not as likely to be accepted in a trade. And that's where a lot of resources are, that's where money's are. And historically, there have been certain populations that have not been in the trades for reasons that we can all really know about. So I think that's where the program is going about, but I wasn't sure about. Are the people that are being targeted for this? Are they already, I had the opinion that they're already trained, that they know how to do whatever, a specialty. And that, but there might be hardships in joining one of these trade organizations or union. That's how I was thinking about it at the very beginning. But I did have a question about who's the target? Are there people who are already trained and ready to go to one of these trade unions, perhaps? Or is there some training involved to make that happen? Fernando, I can agree with, you have another project that is the one from last year, because I don't see anything happening there, and I don't know where they are with the one that's on State Street. So I would like to know what's happening with that project to begin with.
The
daycare one.
we didn't fund that though, but you're.
Yeah, I know, I just would like to know.
I submitted that question.
Okay, all right. So that's another aside, but this one right here is interesting because of the trades, because I mentioned when I first joined this group, I'm wondering why there's not more focus from any of these organizations around having people trained or have already been trained, or they know they have a lot of skill set, but they haven't been able to get in one of the trade unions. That's what I would want some information about that, because I think that's an organization, or these unions are really critical for sustainability and people moving forward.
No, agreed. It's an important job and I think I've mentioned this before, there've been over many years, there've been efforts to get more like folks of color and women into the trades. Let me see. What Cheyenne said was that, this is a valuable project, improved from last year's application. And obviously, we cannot fund very much of this. And again, how is this scalable? So it seems to me one of the important questions that's come up from our discussion is capacity. With two big projects requested for this, under this funding cycle, is the capacity there to do both?
So I just also, I mean, for me, the lack of clarity, there was a ton of interest generated by this project when it was initially proposed for all the reasons that Mary has articulated in the great desire to see people be able to enter the trades. I think your question is a good one. Where are the folks that are being recruited in? You know, are they? What is the pool looking like, and will the training be specific around entering trades? And will the initial program outcome and details, is that? Are they gonna be implementing, like, again, it looks like a classroom type training that then has like some work experience, hands-on experience? Is that how they're gonna be doing it? I didn't have enough information in the quarterly reports from the 2022 project to know if they at times it seemed to me that they had moved to a pathway of assisting people more individually than not in a classroom pattern. There wasn't information about the classes. We got a sheet that a lot of the, you know, this is what we request of workforce development, is like what the, you know, kind of what certificates were completed, and not everybody had all of them, and so it seemed more individualized. So I'm wondering, is it going to be more of a classroom project? Like it was initially proposed to be, and are they going to be exclusively looking for people who want to enter the trades? Not that it's not useful to place people on any project, in any kind of work, I don't mean that, I just wonder if that's if he's going back to that model. That's all.
Could you email me that?
Just the page.
Just that one page. Thank you.
Questions surrounding BHU's application? Okay,
The other thing I would say about the attachments is they included an agreement they have with the village, looks like the village. A fiscal sponsorship agreement. So it'd be useful to know, like, would the village be processing their vouchers? You know, is that how the village would be involved in? Because it seems like this was in place during the time that they implemented their prior 2022 award was implemented in 2023, but the village, even though this was in place, the village wasn't in the, you know, they weren't the ones that were submitting the vouchers or anything like that. So I'm just interested if they're gonna be involved in something.
okay. So the IURA board meets next Friday. Yeah. Oh, we're almost at the end of the month here. Next Friday, for the first public hearing. And we'll be hearing from the housing and ED, at least my understanding is right now, housing and ED applicants. And perhaps some of the public service to make it even number.
Yes,
Um,
depending on how much IRA business is.
and that will, and that will provide us some clarification for our next meeting, which is in early March, I forget the date. Where then we'll start to grapple with the funding limitations that we have. We may have more information from the administration in terms of what they want to do, even though we have a pretty good idea what they want to do with the HUD funds. But we will proceed as if we're going to get funding because we have the applications here. That's what our job is to proceed, even though we may have some convictions that we're not gonna get any money, but regardless. So for us as a committee, start thinking about which of the projects we really support, how the funding might work. We have the chart. Typically, what we'll do at our next meeting is we'll have it up on the board, we'll start plugging in numbers. Of course, you can do that manually, or, if you have things, maybe we can even ask for the Excel format of this form, to be sent to us.
I did send it last week.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed that then.
Okay, but I'm gonna be sending an updated one anyway.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're
cool.
moving this.
Huh?
We're moving the resiliency hub
Yes.
to
Right,
public
up to-
facilities. So, yes.
So that's gonna help a lot. So, and yeah, and that'll tell us, you know, and that'll be very helpful in terms of looking at what funds are available. So we can start to play with that prior to our meeting.
Are we moving anything else from public services?
I'm sorry, did you?
Are we moving another application from public
No.
services?
No, we don't talk
So every,
about one.
so the only one, that's the only one,
Yeah.
okay.
In, just final bit of business, any staff report on these? All right. Well, before we adjourn, I just want to say thank you to all of you. This has been a long meeting. They always are, but I really appreciate your dedication and then commitment to ensuring that our applicants are given a fair hearing. This is really important for them as well as the community. So thank you all. We will call our meeting adjourned at 11:49.